star Safdie, co-creator and star Nathan Fielder, and executive producer and star Emma Stone. Well,
He
do
was
we want to ask
breakdancing
first
next door.
how many people have seen past one?
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
Raise your hand if you've seen past episode 1. All right,
wow.
all right. We will. This will be a spoiler-free zone, but just for context, that's good to
Well,
know.
you should ask how comfortable the people who haven't seen more are with spoilers.
Raise your hand if you're okay with spoilers. Oh, okay.
And who
So you guys aren't
who
gonna
is
watch the
actually
rest of the show.
who is not into spoilers at all?
All right.
All
Okay.
right.
All right.
Okay, good
We'll
to
take
know.
our cues from that.
The reason we ask is because Nizhonniya is not in the first episode, but is in a lot of the later episodes in the season.
Well, you've already spoiled now.
I didn't spoil it. It's on stage. We're all here.
We are so sorry. Wait.
I said she's too hot not to be on film, so.
Oh, wow. Oh my God.
Whoa! We're starting off hot.
What do you have to say to that woman saying that to you?
I think the best thing to say is nothing.
Oh, okay.
Let's start by talking about the backstory for this project. First, Nathan, when you first came to LA, I read that a stranger put a curse on you. Can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is sort of when Benny and I met first. We were just we weren't intending to like make a show or anything, and I was just telling him about my experiences moving to LA, and it's a little bit of an odd city. But when I first moved from Canada, I went to get like a cell phone at the store because you need a different. The systems don't translate. The cellular systems.
Okay.
So
Is it like a CMDA? What is it?
Benny?
CDMA?
different networks.
GSM, right?
Thank you, Emma.
And so, yeah, I was in Westwood. I went to get it, and as I was walking to the store, this woman came up to me and asked for money, and I didn't have any, so I was like, sorry, I don't have. And she said, I curse you. And then I was like, okay. And then I went to the cell phone store and I got my phone, but the whole time I was there, I just kept like thinking about, and I don't believe in, this stuff, but I just couldn't get it out of my head. And then I went to, after I went to an ATM and I took out $20 and I went back to her because it was bugging me. And then I said to her, is the curse gone? And she smiled and said yes. And so I was telling Benny about that, how it's just so weird that someone can like say this thing to you and like what that does to your head.
And it was, to me, I was just like, well, what if she wasn't there?
Yeah.
Then what would you do? Because then your life is ruined, potentially. Because anything that happens, you would have no way of actually knowing for a fact if it was because of her or not. So.
Well,
And
maybe
thus,
you could.
And
yeah.
thus began the curse.
Well, we started sort of riffing on that, and a lot of the ideas, if you watch the show, that you see in it, sort of came out of this thing.
And Benny,
And the woman looks sort of like you, and that's why we wanted you to be on the show.
Benny, I
It was
understand.
me.
Sorry,
It was me.
it was you.
You just didn't know me at the time.
Was the curse actually lifted?
Well, we'll find out.
Benny, I understand that while you guys were talking, you and Nathan, you saw an HGTV tagline that really piqued your interest. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, this was well after we had been kind of talking, but it was just like we had already established HGTV as our place of interest. And I was watching a bunch on the plane, and it was just kind of one of those interstitial kind of like fun, upbeat little montages, and in it said, if you don't like your neighborhood, change it. And I was just like, huh? I was like, what's going on here? And it opened up another kind of door that I didn't know was there in that whole section of television.
And this show is obviously kind of hard to summarize. Emma, when you first spoke to Nathan and Benny about the project, how did they explain it to you, and what interested you about that explanation?
We have alternate memories of how this happened. However, Nathan has now texted me the receipts, which do sort of lean to I was wrong. I didn't know anything about it, but apparently there had been a description of this online, and there was a pilot already written, and I believed that none of that existed. And he asked me if I would ever be interested in doing a show with Benny and him, and I said, yes, it sounds amazing. I'm in, basically. Kind of jokingly, because I didn't know anything about it. And he was
This
like,
was
oh.
over text, by the way.
This was over text, which he has now texted it to me. It was from like 4 years ago or something. So then I was like, then they called me and they thought I already knew all about it. And I didn't. And so Benny was wandering around like an apple orchard with his kids, and Nathan was like, oh, you don't know anything about it? I thought you had already read all about it.
Well, the reason I was
Because she texted, I'm in.
Yes, so that's the reason why I was
Like,
I
okay,
called
great,
Benny,
so
I
we'll
was
just
like,
call
I
and seal
guess
it
she
up.
knows about it.
So I took the phone call while like apple picking, wearing my son, like walking around, and then we found out that she knew nothing. And then Nathan and I had to proceed to pitch her the entire season of the show.
Yeah, so it went on for a while, and I was kind of like, oh, I don't know, maybe I should read it. And they were like, we thought you kind of already had or something. Anyway, but the brass tacks of what they told me were what you just heard, that backstory of, the curse element and HGTV. And that was kind of it. And then they had a pilot, and the full show hadn't been written yet, and so... And I think the initial pilot was pretty similar, but Whitney was a bit different at the beginning. At the beginning, Whitney was sort of conceived to be this very kind of spiritual character who was very sort of, what would you call her? Like, she was sort of like whimsical and really believed that the curse could exist, and it was it's kind of like a yogi.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit, yeah, I mean, Emma brought a lot to the kid, because we kind of like read through everything and discussed it and did like these rewrites, and I think what I said to Benny was, I was like, because I knew Emma in real life a little, and I said she's very funny. She's.
You said I was the funniest person that you had ever met.
Well, you have to say it into the mic.
The funniest person you'd ever met.
I
heard.
I did
Actually,
say.
what he did say was she's a lot funnier than a lot of people actually know. That was the truth.
I see.
That's
It was
not as
nicer.
good.
It was nicer. But
I
it
was like, you
nicer.
see her in some of these movies, and she's pretty funny. But in real life, I was like,
Anyway,
I think she
sorry.
might be funnier than some of these. I don't, not specific. I mean, you're very funny in the movies.
Thanks. Okay, all right. I was joking.
I mean, what do you prefer?
We
To
could-
be funnier in the
let's just
projects
move
or real
on.
life?
Anyway, so Whitney changed a bit as the
You guys
process.
gotta see poor things too.
Okay.
Let's talk to Nizhonniya for a minute.
Yeah.
We meet your character as previously established in episode 2, and like your character, Kara, you are an artist and an actor and a poet and a musician. How did you come to be involved with this project?
Instagram, actually.
Say more about that.
Yeah, I got like a message on Instagram with a casting agent, and they were just like, can you audition for this? And I was like, sure, absolutely. And so I just like submitted like a thing, not thinking I was ever gonna get it. And I was like, okay, whatever, here it is. I did the thing. And then pretty soon I was like in a room with you guys.
A lot.
So,
We did a lot.
Yeah. And and we just did a series of auditions, and
What did they tell you about the character, and sort of what intrigued you about it?
she was just a really cool like native artist, and I thought that was like so like being native, like her character is so progressive, and it's such a simple like thing, like, oh, like she's an artist, she's native, but like that's not actually being shown in any kind of TV show or movie. So I was like, whoa, this is awesome. I want to do this.
Yeah.
So,
And I am really fascinated by the
Good job
Kara.
with no spoilers, by the way. I mean, you didn't really go that deep into it, so nobody really knows what's gonna happen, right? Okay.
I'm really
Thanks.
fascinated by the Kara and Whitney relationship. I'm not even sure I'd call it a friendship. And, you know, obviously staying spoiler free, did you guys together talk at all about, like, come up with, you know, what their backstory is? Like, how did they meet? You know, what is their friendship like? I'm just interested if Emma and Nizhonniya, if you did that and talked about it.
You guys. I mean, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, it was very collaborative with Nizhonniya, I think, because we had envisioned the character a specific way originally, but I think a lot of elements of the character weren't fully formed, I think, in the script stage. Or there were some that we were just sort of like ruminating about the best way to portray it. And then when Nizhonniya came in, I mean, we had a lot of discussions too in general, and we actually like made her like improvise with us a little, which was, I don't know how that was for you.
We did a lot.
Yeah,
we did like full interviews
because there were
with
full
her.
scripted things, and you know, we're very open to also just like, well, how would someone say this, and you know, versus like the exact words, and so, you know, she had some takes on the character that we thought were really interesting, and we sort of kind of did a rewrite and incorporated that into the script. But what was it like for you? I mean, what was your experience coming in there? I was just looking through my old iPhone stuff, and I like have the iPhone video of you in the room, like when you're just there, like improvising us, like showing us your work and everything. But I think the dynamic between them, you'll see in this is a little bit of a spoiler, but in like episode 2, it's sort of like these people are friends, but you can tell it's like they're not like super close friends. It's like a friendship based on sort of a business relationship where Whitney collects the art of Kara, and so that money aspect, I think, confuses the relationship in a way, and I think that sort of came out of like the dynamic when Nizhonniya came in. But yeah, what's your take on that?
my take on like working with you guys.
I don't know. Yeah, actually. Well, if it's bad,
Well, no,
don't say.
I was just thinking, because it was like when you mentioned episode 2, you'll see it because we were shooting the scene and it wasn't going well, and we had to make a decision at lunchtime to kind of change everything, and we rewrote the scene just in that moment based on what was going on between you guys. So it really is like it was led from kind of actors forward. So I don't know.
Yeah, how did that feel for you? Because maybe that's not. Yeah. Well, so yeah, you'd say. Just say you're just looking at me, and I'm like.
This is what happened in episode 2. You'll see.
I don't know. It really was like a collaborative effort. I felt like I was very actively like working with you guys in shaping this character. It wasn't like you guys were just like, all right, this is who she is. You guys were so good at like letting me have a little bit of the paintbrush. And yeah.
Was that helpful?
Absolutely. Because I had never acted before. This was like my first time ever.
You guys who haven't seen it, you're gonna be blown away
she's
by
so
her
good.
performance.
It's the thing that I feel bad for you is you haven't seen episodes 8 and 9, which we're showing tonight, and that is like 7, 8, and 9 is really like a huge kind of amazing turn for it.
So Nathan and Benny, you guys weren't initially planning to act in the series. How did that decision change?
I always knew that Nathan was going to be Asher and I was going to be Dougie, and I don't know, there was definitely early on. I feel like I was pretty confident that was going to happen. I feel like Nathan was definitely not as sure of playing certain parts of Asher, but I knew he had it in him, and I knew he could.
Which parts specifically?
Just in general, the whole thing. You know, there's lots of elements that really did. I don't know what you guys are thinking or talking about here. I'm solely talking about Nathan as an actor and a performer. So from that point of view, he really does bring, like, I just knew that there would be a lot of complexity there. And then when Emma came on board, and then it really came time to build their relationship, that's where a lot of like backstory came in also. Like, how did they meet? What was Whitney's past before? And I think that was actually, we sat down and read all of the scripts, you know, and we went over everything really to kind of go into the backstory. Where did she go to college? Emma asked all of these questions to really hammer us home, and I don't know if you want to take that handoff and elaborate on it, but I felt it was a lot of fun.
Got the ball. Yeah, no, it was. I mean, it really was. As Nizhonniya's saying, like the process was really great because all that was there was the pilot at the beginning, and so we were able to sort of like look into how this was all building. You guys started writing it, and then we read through everything, which took a really long time. Wasn't that like a number of days?
Yeah, multiple days, all day long.
Yeah, they came over and we read through everything, and then just like asked questions. I tried to, because I think that Whitney is. I thought that the project I had done right before this was the hardest thing that I had ever done. This is for sure the hardest character I've ever played. Or the most complicated character I've ever played, because she is like a human mood ring, and she's, you know, she shifts no matter what, who's looking at her, what she needs to be, you know, and so to try to parse how you become that way, that level of sort of, again, no spoilers, but as she sort of self-immolates, it's harder and harder to parse where the hell she's coming from, I think even for herself.
Right.
So I did have a lot of questions about this character that I don't even know if I would ask about any other characters that I've played, but it was amazing because we were able to build that together all throughout the process, and made her super fascinating to try to play.
Absolutely. I love that a lot of times, and you see this in episode 1, but as the series goes on, the characters are shot from a distance, or they're shot like through a partial obstruction like a doorway or a window, and it's almost like the camera is eavesdropping on them, and that the characters don't know they're being watched. And I'm just wondering, as performers, how does that type of framing sort of affect the choices you make in a given scene, knowing that it's got this almost like surreptitious feel?
Well, it was be more interesting for these guys because Benny and I knew where the cameras were always, but sometimes you were like, where's the camera? I don't see a camera. Because we'd be outside windows a lot of the time, and you actually couldn't see a camera. So what does that do? Like,
I think
because
it's
normally as an actor, your goal is to get your face seen all the time, right, by the camera.
yeah. So typically, what you want as a performer is for the camera to be 6 to 8 inches from your face,
Right.
or else you can't do your job.
Right.
Honestly,
It doesn't like
you
that.
guys have heard of theater? Yeah, right. You know, it's like, okay, they're performing. Anyway, so see, he was right. Funniest person in the world.
Very, very funny. I mean, she's
Yeah.
not a professional comedian like me. You know, when you're a professional, you really have to hone your craft. You get your comedy to a higher level than a non-professional can. But she is very funny for a lay person.
You have a license.
I thought you were gonna say for a lady.
Nathan
Anyway,
actually got his
so
license in comedy.
but anyway, so it actually was pretty interesting to not know sometimes, or to have it be from that distance. And again, I actually do think it would be a spoiler to talk about even the cinematography of it, because I think that people are going down rabbit holes of why it's shot the way that it's shot as it goes on. But yeah, it always does sort of feel like someone's watching. What did you think, Nizhonniya?
I mean, I don't know if I can really answer that because this is my first time acting. So it was very odd not knowing where the camera was.
Do you feel like it helped? Like, I can't tell if, because for me personally, when a camera's there, I'm thinking about there's a camera there. As an actor, you have to pretend there's not a camera. So does not seeing it help in a way?
It did.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely did.
Well, yeah. I imagine if what it does, or the goal is like, I guess you're supposed to not even think about it and just exist within what you're feeling. So
and not to have
Yeah.
crew right,
Yeah.
like hovering right there. Because there's a lot of, there's several people in the show who haven't acted a ton before, and it could have helped the performances, but
I don't know if anybody has seen like early old candid camera where they like shot on 16 millimeter black and white film, but they literally would be hiding in vans and behind walls, and so because the cameras were so big. Now it's you kind of, because your phone can get into the corner and stuff, it's a little bit, you kind of don't have that feeling. But when you watch those older episodes of the show, you see like a car like being filmed from across the street, and then the people who are like the marks in the show walk out of frame, and then the car just slowly drives to get them back into the shot.
It's very cinematic.
Yeah, it is really
I remember
very
that
cinematic.
really early on, you guys
Yeah.
talking about that candid camera, and it really is like, it's kind of beautiful when you just watch it for the camera work alone.
Yes, it's an amazing experience.
So we have to talk about Asher's confrontation with Monica, the local news reporter. We learned so much about Asher and Whitney in that moment. So for Emma and Nathan, what kind of conversations did you have leading up in preparation for that scene, in terms of like because they both have such very different reactions, and like how did you settle on what your approach was going to be?
Oh yeah. I guess that was, I think the level of, the character has like, the level of anger, I think we had like discussions about, because there are moments, I think, where that was sort of like built in, I think, a little later.
Yeah.
As sort of like that this guy has like, he can sort of snap, and then kind of realizes when he snaps that he is snapping and tries to pretend
Yes.
it's not happening. I've
It's-
seen people do this type of thing and try to like act like everything's normal, but I think it's like, it felt like it was pretty good with like what the characters are always feel like they're being watched. I mean, that has to do with how it's shot too, where they're projecting that onto almost everyone around them, and that's what I think makes it so uncomfortable, is because it's not like these characters don't care. It's like what's uncomfortable is that they care too much. And sometimes it's about the right thing, and sometimes it's about the wrong thing, but they really do care more than most people. And so it's uncomfortable because even when they care about the right thing, you sort of want to be like, stop caring.
And it's also like, and even like, that's one of the benefits, that because once we got the show to make the whole show, we didn't have to shoot the pilot first. So we were able to learn and understand parts of characters, and the storyline shifted based on performances and everything. So it allowed us to kind of add these things back into the first episode. One of them in particular was this idea that Asher thinks he understands what is the right thing to do in a moment, and halfway through realizes it's not, and then has to kind of walk it back and make sure everything's okay. So there's that level that's always kind of there. But.
Well, and Emma, you're just watching Whitney, like she starts blinking faster, and her smile, and it's just like, how conscious were you in that moment of like, you have to communicate so much with your face, but obviously she doesn't want to say anything.
Oh, I think that was the challenge of Whitney all the way through, is that a lot of what happens with her is what she's not saying rather than what she is, which is my favorite kind of acting to get to do. So that one, I mean, that was like a last minute thing. I think you were, because Nathan and I were together in the scene, and Nathan was directing, but I think that after we had done a lot of that, Penny was like, what if you just smiled the whole time? Like, just to see.
Yes.
And Nathan's like, yeah, let's just try that. And her just like, the entire time, and it felt so wrong doing it, and then I was like, but that's what makes it right, because it's so insane that Asher's like having this meltdown, and Whitney's just like smiling, like this will fix it, and it's so psychotic.
The thing is, that sounds like it was not fair of me to ask of that, because that's a really difficult thing to do. To be smiling and to show an emotion behind the smile, and then an emotion behind that is so insane. So I always
so
love
fun.
to watch. Yeah, it's crazy.
I was going to ask if that moment with the snap, when he literally snaps, was that in the script, or was that something that
Yeah, that was in the script.
Yeah.
Or something that I got so angry that I
But
didn't.
my favorite though is Nathan was pulling from like the deep breath. I remember when you pulled out the deep breath, it was like, oh my God, you know, I was so excited that it was just like, it's just really, those are the moments that I find so fun to kind of see. But
Emma, you mentioned a little bit, like, there's so many moments in the show that really, it's an effective use of silence, of pauses, and you're really seeing so much happen on the characters' faces, but you're not saying anything. And you know, you talked a little bit about this being your favorite type, but Nizhonniya, in your experience, you know, since this was your first job, I mean, there are moments later in the series where we can absolutely tell that Kara has a lot of thoughts going on, but she's really, you know, she is communicating in a way that she feels is appropriate at the time. But I'm just wondering, how did you approach those scenes where you really had to communicate so much without actually saying dialogue?
With my character, honestly, it was just thinking about like how much I don't like Whitney. Like that was honestly like the fuel that I was using, and people that I know that were like her character, and I was just constantly just like getting in the zone, like. But in real life, I would actually say something to them, but for this, like I would just think about like how much I don't like her character.
in episode 2, I remember I was texting you during the scene